Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So today's an exciting day because I have 7 new MIDI tools to announce for all of you, ending a 2024 that I've spent basically doing nothing but making MIDI tools. There were 12 that I released initially when Live 12 came out, and then with 12.1, there were a new 3 in a pack that is 5 tools total that's free, and you can get through Ableton. I'll put information about that down below. But today we're really talking about this newest batch of 7 tools. Link about that is down below. If you have been so generous as to support me in the past by buying some of the older tools, there's special discounts for you. So make sure you check your email. If you don't know whether or not you're on the mailing list, you can join it by using the link down below. You can also email me. All this information will be down below. But let's really dive in here and see these new devices. So we have 2 generators, 5 transformers. We're going to start off with this one called Even Seed. So the idea behind this device basically is that I wanted something that worked kind of like the native device Seed, but that is a little bit more controllable, I guess, and a little bit more predictable. Particularly the biggest issue that I've had with this device for my purposes is that it can just be so inconsistent in terms of how it distributes notes. For example, we have there's kind of space in the middle and a lot of stuff going on here. I guess if I go to one voice, it's still just sort of uneven. It's just a little bit uneven and a little bit fiddly for me for what I'm trying to do with it. So what I wanted to do was make one that's going to still be random, or probabilistic, and I'll show you kind of what I mean by that. But it's just going to give us a little bit more consistent results. And the way that I arrived at that is to work with this idea of kind of creating segments of the clip. So in this case, the segment is a quarter note long, and we're going to generate, let's say, 50% density. At 50% density, we have quarter notes. Our grid is set to 16th notes, so we'll generate 2 16th note events per quarter note. And we have in this device, the length of the notes, the duration of them is fixed. It's always going to be whatever the grid is. And the result is just a little bit more, to me, consistent and more useful for, particularly for rhythmic material. So let me just play you whatever we have just generated. So that's already starting to sound like something that you might want to use in music. And on top of that, there are many other features to this device. So one is the ability to, kind of similar to how the Seed device has a concept called voices. This one has a concept called layers, where we can produce kind of multiple layers. So it basically does 2 passes over the clip. And this one is being a little bit temperamental with how I've set up the selection. I feel like something changed in Live 12.1 with how the region works, and I don't think it's as good as it was before. Maybe that's just me. Anyway, there we go. So now we have 2 layers. So you can see basically we're doing 50% twice and just making sure that we don't generate the same note 2 times. And then on top of that, we have this ability to force the layers to align with one another so that we get chords, which is really handy. So like that, and that, and that. So that's super nice. Probably not so much with material like this that's rhythmic, but really great if you're working with any kind of, pitched instrument. We'll go back to 1 here. Moving over to the pitch tab here. So this one basically allows you to set the probability of each pitch within the octave appearing. So if I bring all of these sliders down except for the first one, it's only going to create notes on this first track, whatever is associated with, in this case, C3. If I go down to C1, we'll get a kick because that's what I have living there. Let's find one that I like. There we go. And then I can kind of bring up the likelihood of any other element that gives me a lot of control over what gets generated. Maybe not that. Not that either. I want like a snare, and I don't know that I organized this kit that well. That's fine. And we can just generate more options. I'm going to increase the density a little too. And then we have the same concept here for the velocity. So by default, we just have one slider up, so everything's going to be the same velocity, but we can kind of use, again, this probabilistic system where we kind of create this probability distribution that determines what the velocity should be. So this is basically a way to really quickly generate ideas. You can already get a lot of variety in terms of pitches and velocities, and then from here you can modify this however you want using, either modifying it manually or using some MIDI transformers. So that is super cool. Let's look at the other generator, which is called Mask Pattern, and for this one we'll use this set of Udo samples that I have. So this is this kind of idiosyncratic Euclidean pattern generator. There's no other sequencer like this anywhere. It's kind of my own weird idea, but I think it's really just really useful, again, way to generate new ideas. So the idea basically, and this is really a device that you'll learn most quickly by just messing around with it, but basically it works by having two Euclidean patterns that are kind of layered on top of one another. And by sort of making use of the space in between the patterns, or the kind of way that the patterns overlap with one another, it's able to generate up to 4 patterns. So in the default state, if we just generate like this, then we get something like this. If I then enable the second pattern, I can then change the relationship between these two, like this. I have to delete again because the clip, there we go. And you can see that the pattern is reflected here on the view in the device, or obviously you can look at the MIDI clip as well. You can change the pitch of each of the tracks, where the first track you set the pitch absolutely, and then for the remaining ones, you set it as a transposition. And of course, you can set the velocity of them too. Oops, I liked what we had there. So you can see that there's this kind of alternating thing going on. And as you start to play around with these 4 sliders up here, you can get all kinds of different patterns. And then, so the first 3, and I could explain how they work. I'm going to actually publish a little article that explains exactly how the algorithm works for anybody who's interested in that, but it's probably too much boring detail for a video like this. Like you're seeing here, you just muck around with it and see what happens. It also has this rotation feature that's kind of weird and basically allows you to kind of like shift all of the patterns to be kind of together or separate. So if I go like this, I'm basically rotating them in opposite directions relative to one another. So just another way to kind of remix the patterns. So definitely an unusual device, but one that I've been finding has been giving me a lot of really interesting results. And I'll take this opportunity now to move on to the next device, which I developed actually, I think, if I remember correctly, kind of because of this one. I found that with this one, I wanted like a final density knob that would allow me to kind of like remove from the whole final generated thing some of the notes. And I just like couldn't fit it. I was like trying to fit a fifth one in here, and there wasn't enough space. And then I realized that it just needs to be a separate device. So that is where, and I'm actually going to clone this clip before I transform it. That is where this reduce device came from. So the idea behind this one is basically that it's actually very similar to something that lives inside of another device called pattern transform, but it's kind of like simpler and easier to use and more direct at this purpose of just taking some weight or some activity out of a clip. So if I play this one, and then I just turn this density dial and make sure everything's selected, I can just mute some notes and kind of just evenly reduce the intensity here. This clustering knob basically makes it so that at its 0 position, we use a Euclidean pattern here, so we're just evenly extracting. But if I use the clustering, then it will generally put events together. So you could kind of like eliminate half the pattern or whatever with clustering at max. And then the rotation just allows us to shift along. So, I think one thing that's really valuable here is the ability to kind of like generate something crazy and maybe a little bit chaotic. And there's so many generators out there, including ones that I've made that could do this, like phase pattern or stages or blocks. And once you get that, then using this device to kind of carve away information that's potentially not needed can be really useful. This can also be a really useful device just for arrangement purposes. If you want to be able to have something that kind of builds up to a more complex state or builds down from a complex state, then this can be a very useful tool. It also has this legato feature, which was suggested by somebody in Discord very recently, where basically it's going to lengthen the notes so that they line up with each other, so that the start and ends line up like that. Which with this instrument doesn't do very much because we're talking about drums here, but if you were working with a synth, then you might get very different results by turning that legato feature on and off. One thing that you may have noticed there is that when legato is on, it doesn't mute the notes, it actually gets rid of them entirely. So just something to be aware of. If you want to kind of be able to keep them and bring them back, you might not want to use legato, but if you want what legato does, you can use it. All right, so that's the third device. And now let's see what else we have here. Range is pretty cool. So I'm going to, for this one actually, start with a clip that looks like this. So we're just going to do a little staircase. And for whatever reason, the velocities are all really low on these, and I don't know why. Okay. So what does it sound like? Kind of cool, actually. Let's clone that. So the idea behind this range is basically like, this one came actually from me being frustrated in situations where you generate some pattern and you're sending the MIDI to a drum rack, and the drum rack's sounds are not on the same notes that your pattern is on. And so then you have to like figure out how to make it fit. So in the most basic case, you can, just shift all of them pretty easily like that. You can also do things like stretch them. So if I take the high value here and I stretch, I'm just going to be stretching the pattern out over more space. Or less space, you can kind of compress it. We also have these other modes like wrap. So this one will kind of do what it says. If we go back to the default, we have the original pattern, but as I bring this high down, we're creating this kind of, basically the ramp fits into a smaller space, and so then we just do 2 ramps instead, or 3, or whatever is needed to fit. And you can either come down from the top here like this, or you can come up from the bottom, or both. Similarly, we have a fold option, which is just like the wrap, except we kind of do this triangle shape going back and forth. And then similarly, we have a clip, which takes that maximum and minimum and just clamps there. We also have this shaper. So after you've performed whatever transformation you're performing here on the left-hand side, then you can use this function that you've seen in many of my devices if you've used them before, where we can kind of get these different shapes from the values. And we can also flip it. So you have this exact same interface for velocity, chance, and pitch. And that's what that device does. I think it's really useful for all kinds of purposes. As you know, if you've been watching these videos, I'm just very interested in the idea of how do we take an idea and generate variations on it so that it can be used within a composition to make the process of getting from one really cool idea to one really great piece of music easier. And this is just one of those handy utilities that I think makes that process much easier. The next one I'm going to show you is one that I am extremely excited about. And you may have heard about the precursor to this device already. So that precursor was called Phrase Shuffler. And it came out of Ned Rush, who's Ableton certified trainer, Mac certified trainer like me, YouTuber, who saw what I was doing with the MIDI tools and kind of came to me with this idea, explaining that the jungle producers of the 90s had this technique where they would slice up their breaks and then they would rearrange those slices in groups of 3. And it would be really great if we could basically take groups of 3 eighth notes or whatever other interval and rearrange those slices. And so we just made a device that did just that. It was called Phrase Shuffler. It was free. You can still get it. And it was like pretty incredible how quickly it was able to make things that sounded like plausible jungle. And so from there, once we saw how effective this was, we wanted to make a better version of the device. And that's where Phrase Shuffler Pro came from. So if we start here with this clip, I'm just going to play it. Oops, hold on. Stop everything. Play the break. By the way, this comes from a series of videos that Ned Rush did several months back, where he basically for 26 consecutive days did a video on a classic break where he took the break, sliced it up in live, and then showed how to use the slice audio to MIDI track feature in live to get really, really nice MIDI for breakbeats. So I'll put the link in the description down below for that one as well if you want to learn about that. It's so awesome. And yeah, combined with this device that I'm about to show you, it's basically instant jungle. So if we take eighth notes and 3 eighth notes as our phrase interval, which basically means that each of these should be eighth notes. They are. So for every 3, we're going to be rearranging those slices. And this device has 2 tabs. So the first one allows us to basically kind of replace any one of those slices with another one. So if I take this first one and I just move this dot. Wait, we need 3 here. What's going on? There we go. Then I'm basically replacing the first slice with the stuff from some other slice. so I can just manually rearrange them. The previous device was all about random, and we still have that. So boom, random. But one thing that I really wanted to do in this new version was similar to what we had with the even seed, give ourselves a little bit more control with this kind of probability distribution. So this is the exact same idea where I can say, you know what, actually, I want just that first slice to appear repeatedly. Or I want it to be mixed in with this other one. And so on. So that's really cool. I also thought, well, wouldn't it be awesome if I could kind of have this randomization, but sort of like mix between the randomized version and the original one that I had. And that's where this variance control comes from. So with variance at 100, we just get, you know, new shuffles. But with variance at 0, actually, let me go back to the original. We're going to get just the original clip. And as I turn up the variance, I'm basically mixing between the shuffled version and the original version. So if you really like what you have already, and you're like, and this doesn't just need to apply to breaks, right? But if you're just like, I really like what I have here, some idea, whether it's a melody or a rhythm or whatever, and you just want a little bit of a variation to it, basically what you can do is randomize it with a low variance and get something that's a little bit different from what you had, but still recognizable to the listener. So this, I think, has just a ton of power in this domain that I've been talking about of just a little bit of variation to aid the compositional process. Any changes that are made by this randomization tab are also reflected here on this order tab on the grid here. So anything that happens as a result of a, as a shuffle like this, you're going to see that here, and then you can edit it. So I am so excited about this device. I think this is maybe the best one of all of them, just in terms of how fun it is to use and how easy it makes a thing that is typically a lot of work. So I'm really excited to see what you all make with this one. All right, what's the next one going to be? Let's do Chord Inverter. So this one is actually also another collaboration with Danksauce, who does like incredible stuff with sound design and live in particular, making really elaborate racks to make crazy sounds, makes also Macs for live devices. I'm really excited to see what he does with the new ABL devices in Max 9. So anyway, go watch his videos. Link is down below. But he came to me with this idea that was like, well, I want to, I like chords. I work with chords, and I want to be able to invert those chords and do that easily. So we made a device that does that. So I'm going to come over to this pitched instrument. I'm actually going to start with something that is generated from the Stacks device from Ableton. And oops. We'll do half duration, and then I'm just going to duplicate it. And then I'm only going to select the second one so you can kind of see what's happening more clearly. And then with this chord inverter, basically, as the slider goes up, we're just performing inversions. And as it goes down, we're performing inversions down. So let's hear. Have this on. Kind of need to adjust my instrument here. 1 second. So we just have different versions of the same chord here. Danksauce also had this kind of crazy idea, which was stretching the chord. So first I'm going to reset the inversion that we did, although that didn't work because of the way the MIDI tools work. But anyway, typically if you make some change and then you just hit reset, it'll go back to 0, back to normal. You can also randomize, which is really handy. And this attraction control is for cases where you have material that's maybe not quite obviously chords. And so it kind of like modifies how the chord detection algorithm works. And basically, the higher the number, the more likely notes are to get bundled together into chords. And the lower the number, the less likely they are. For most typical chord progressions, you can just leave it what it is and it'll work. But if you were to say like use seed and generate some crazy stuff, this can actually give you some pretty weird and interesting results. And again, make kind of controlled variations to your clips by kind of modifying how much you're grouping together in those chords. So Danxos's other idea is this thing called stretching, where instead of, unlike the inversion where you're kind of going, all the notes are going in the same direction, you actually have them going in opposite directions, like this, right? So that's the stretching, and you can combine these things together. So you can get all kinds of different voicings of your chords. And that's that. Along with this, we also, because we had already put all this work into figuring out chords, and particularly this chord detection algorithm, which was one of the hardest parts of making this, it also became possible to do one other device, which is going to be a free device that is kind of like a baseline generator that uses your chord progression to generate a baseline for you. So here we have bass and lead. It can also generate like a lead. And if we have it in bass mode, it's basically just going to take the lowest notes. And let's actually modify this chord just a little bit. Let's go to stacks again and just make something fresh. We need to change the root note. And we need to be in a scale. Okay, fine. Shush. Okay. So we have a chord progression here that maybe we're using somewhere in our track. And I'm going to go to bass and lead, and I'm going to hit transform. And it's just going to get rid of everything but the lowest notes. You can also shift those notes by octave in whichever direction you want to. And you can also shift the velocity. Attraction works exactly the same way as it does in Chord Inverter. And if you do lead mode, then it takes the highest note. So if I go back to the beginning and we do lead or bass, you can see we're taking the top or the bottom. So that's a free device. The other one that is free, by the way, that I don't know if I mentioned, is Reduce. So those are both free. If you need free things, which I've been there, then go get those. And all the rest of them are available as well. There are going to be discounts kind of during this like Black Friday post-release period. So if you think you want to buy these at some point, now is probably the best time. And again, like I said, if you've supported me in the past and bought devices in the past, there is a special discount for you. So check those inboxes or send me an email to make sure that you get that. Let me know what you think about these in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a ton of fun times making music with these devices. Thanks.